Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something really critical, but maybe a bit intimidating for folks in digital forensics. Expert witness testimony. You've done all this amazing investigative work, finding those digital breadcrumbs. But then comes the really crucial part, explaining it all.
Right, explaining complex tech stuff to people who might not, well, know much about tech at all, like a jury.
Exactly. It feels high stakes, and honestly, thinking about being on the stand, it can be pretty overwhelming.
It definitely can.
So our mission in this deep dive is basically to unpack the essentials of expert witness ethics and prep, using our source material so you feel more ready, if that call comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Being a great investigator is like only half the equation. You've also got to be a clear, credible communicator in court.
Makes sense.
And our source material really digs into not just the ethics, but also the practical preparation that you need. It's like building your credibility sort of brick by brick way before you even see a courtroom.
Okay, let's get into it then. The source starts by pointing out that it's not just about trials, right? There are lots of different legal settings where we might end up testifying.
That's spot on. It's much broader than TV dramas suggest. The chapter lists several U.S.-based proceedings, like grand juries.
Right, the investigative ones.
Yeah, they're looking into potential crimes, and they have subpoena power, meaning they can legally demand info or testimony. Then there's the arraignment.
That's where they read the charges formally. The accused pleads guilty or not guilty.
Exactly. And you've also got detention hearings deciding if someone stays in custody before trial.
And evidentiary hearings. Those sound important. The judge looks at evidence before the trial to see if it's even allowed.
Precisely. They can exclude things or limit how they're used. And then, of course, the trial itself, criminal or civil, presenting evidence to the judge or jury.
That's the main event, I suppose.
And testimony happens during the main part of the case in chief, and sometimes during sentencing too. But don't forget depositions.
Ah, yes. Sworn testimony, but outside the courtroom.
Right. Usually in civil cases, attorneys are there, the witness, a court reporter, it's recorded, and that record. It can definitely be shown in court later.
So even if it feels less formal.
Your words carry the same weight. That's a key takeaway.
And the advice that really stood out to me was prepare for every single one of these, even a deposition like it's a full jury trial.
Absolutely. That consistency in preparation, it builds confidence and, just as importantly, ensures accuracy.
Seems logical. Keeps you sharp.
Totally. The core ideas, clear communication, ethical conduct, they apply everywhere. The chapter also introduces the key people you'll see in court.
The cast of characters, so to speak.
Kind of. You've got the judge obviously running the show, ruling on things, the court reporter making the official record, the court clerk handles admin stuff, the bailiff keeps order.
And then the legal teams. Prosecutor for the government in criminal cases.
Trying to prove guilt. And the defense attorney representing the accused.
Protecting their rights.
Yeah.
And in civil cases.
You have the plaintiff, the one claiming harm, and the defendant, the one being accused, and maybe the jury.
The deciders of fact.
In many cases, yes. And then there are the witnesses, which is where, digital forensic investigators often fit in, usually as expert witnesses.
Right.
And the chapter makes a good point. Just having a basic grasp of how a criminal case flows from arrest or warrant through motions to trial, jury instructions, it really can lower your stress levels if you have to testify.
Knowing the map helps navigate the territory.
Exactly. Bottom line here, thorough preparation before any testimony is just non-negotiable.
Okay, prep is key. Got it. But what exactly is our role on the stand? The source distinguishes between witness types, right?
Yes, very clearly. There's a lay witness, or fact witness, and an expert witness. A lay witness testifies only to what they personally saw or did. The facts they know directly.
Like an officer saying, I found the laptop on the desk.
Precisely. Who, what, when, where, based on direct experience.
But an expert witness, that's us.
That's where our specialized training, our experience, our skills come into play. An expert can also testify to facts, but critically, they can offer opinions based on their expertise.
Ah, the opinion. That's the key differentiator.
That's it. The ability to interpret the evidence and form an opinion is what makes you an expert in the court's eyes.
So right from the start of any case, we should be thinking, okay, if this goes to court, what opinions might flow from this evidence?
You've got it. Treat every investigation like it's heading to trial. That's the advice. And communicate early and often with the attorney.
Really get on the same page.
Yes. understand their strategy, their theory of the case, and gather info on everyone involved, suspects, victims, even the opposing lawyers.
It's not just about the data, but the context and understanding the core arguments, right? Like what's actually being disputed.
Exactly. How did the digital artifacts support one side or refute the other? The example used is willful possession of illicit images. What data points to intent or lack thereof?
And you need to tell the attorney what you find, whether it helps their case or not.
Absolutely. Transparency is crucial. And the chapter suggests something else really smart. Research the opposing expert witness.
Oh, interesting. Look into their background.
Yeah. Their CV, experience, education, certifications, maybe even find transcripts of their past testimony.
That gives you insight into how they might approach things.
Definitely. You can anticipate arguments, understand their strengths, maybe even spot weaknesses. There's even a cool anecdote in the source where the opposing expert actually ended up validating the host's opinions during a hearing.
Wow. Having the other side basically say, yeah, this person knows their stuff, that's powerful.
Huge impact. So as we prep, the source gives us some core questions to keep asking ourselves. Like, what's the attorney's main theory? Does my analysis fit logically within that? What specific digital facts are central to my testimony?
And critically, what can I confirm and what can't I confirm based on the evidence? Knowing the limits.
Exactly. Know your boundaries. And the recurring advice, go back to basics. Review your reports, review your notes, practice answering questions.
It's a team effort with the attorney, making sure the evidence is understood clearly.
Right. It's collaborative. And don't forget, the chapter notes, a judge has to officially approve you as an expert, which leads us nicely to the CV.
The curriculum vitae. Your professional calling card for the court.
Pretty much. It's the document outlining your education, experience, certifications, memberships, everything that qualifies you as an expert.
And while there isn't just one strict format,
They all contain similar professional history, core stuff.
so what are those key sections?
Well, first up, name and contact info. Make sure the spelling's perfect. It suggests including your specific field of expertise, too.
Good tip if there are multiple experts.
Yeah. And on the address, it makes a good point about privacy. Maybe use an office address or a P.O. box, not your home address.
Smart, practical advice. What's next?
Usually a summary or bio, quick overview of your career, education, experience, then the details. Formal education, degrees, certificates, relevant employment history.
Focus on relevance, right?
Absolutely. Same for teaching experience if it relates to digital forensics, include it. Then licenses, professional memberships in relevant groups.
What about publications?
Definitely list those books, articles, white papers, even relevant blogs. Include the publisher and date. Awards, too, if they're relevant to your field.
And previous testimony experience. That seems important.
Very, but you don't need long summaries. Just a simple citation like U.S. v. Smith, 2015 is usually enough to show you've done this before.
Keep it focused. Avoid clutter.
Exactly. No high school achievements or unrelated part-time jobs, just what supports your expertise for this case.
And the absolute must-do.
Be 100% truthful and accurate, no exaggeration, no padding, definitely no lies.
The source mentions the Chester Kwiatkowski case, arrested for fake credentials after testifying dozens of times.
A really stark warning. The consequences are severe. Your credibility is everything.
So how does the court decide if you qualify?
There's often a specific hearing. You're sworn in, questioned by lawyers, maybe the judge too, about your background and expertise based on your CV.
And the judge makes the call.
Yep. The judge rules if you're approved as an expert for that case. If yes, then you work closely with the attorney who called you.
Okay. Approved. You're in court. Time to testify. What's that like?
The chapter describes it well. You take the oath. Judge is there. Prosecution and defense tables with lawyers, maybe the defendant. Jury box might be full. All eyes on you.
Sounds intense.
It can be. That's normal. The advice is good. Take a deep breath. Focus on the questions.
Right, just breathe.
And remember, you'll be explaining technical stuff simply for the judge and jury and giving your expert opinions. Speak slowly, clearly. Analogies are your friend here.
Making the complex understandable.
That's the goal. Help them grasp it.
I remember that anecdote about the agent in the Prime Directive got worn down and agreed he'd violated something that didn't even exist.
Huh. Yes, a perfect example of why you must understand the question before answering. Don't get tripped up.
So how do you handle tough questions?
The source gives great lines. It's okay to say, I'm not sure what you're asking. Could you rephrase? Or simply, I do not know. Honesty is key.
What if it's outside your lane?
Then say so. That's beyond the scope of my expertise, or that wasn't part of my investigation. Stick to what you know.
And those yes-no traps. When the answer needs more detail.
The suggested response is perfect. That's not a yes or no question. It requires a more detailed response. Don't let them force an inaccurate simplification.
Good way to handle it. And it's not just words, right? How you present yourself matters.
Hugely. Credibility comes from your appearance, your tone, your posture, professional attire, respectful demeanor.
And specific testifying do's and don'ts.
Yeah, some clear guidelines. Don't argue with the attorney questioning you. Stay unbiased. Speak clearly and slowly. Avoid slang and acronyms, or explain them if you must use them.
Keep it professional.
Definitely. No jokes, it's serious. And listen to the whole question before you answer only what was asked. Don't volunteer extra info.
Stick to the facts. Stay neutral. Assist the court.
Exactly. You're an unbiased helper for the fact finder. And this all connects back to how the evidence was handled initially.
Right. Following best practices during collection is vital.
Because if you didn't, the judge might exclude the evidence. Integrity is everything. Which brings us to authentication.
Proving the evidence is what you say it is.
Yes. As the expert, you testify that the digital evidence presented is a true and exact copy of the original.
Which is why we work on copies, never originals, and use hashing.
Precisely. Hashing validates the copy's integrity. And for evidence to even be admissible, it has to be reliable, relevant to the case facts, and material meaning important to a disputed issue.
And if it was collected illegally?
It can get tossed out. So preserving that original evidence in its original state is paramount. If you have to collect volatile data, which changes the system,
you need a solid explanation for the court.
Absolutely. You need to justify why and how. It's acknowledged this whole process can be, well, a lot. And it brings up ethical questions.
Which leads to the final big topic, ethics, the foundation.
Truly the bedrock. The chapter hammers home due diligence, truthfulness, objectivity. Your personal and professional ethics guide your conduct. Mess up here.
Big consequences.
Yeah.
Evidence excluded, career damage.
Exactly. And as investigators, we have specialized knowledge. There's potential for misuse. Even just not following up on a potential lead, that can be seen as an ethical lapse.
Wow. So what are ethics, fundamentally?
Moral principles guiding behavior. The source notes it can vary culturally, and professional groups often set their own codes.
Like IACIS?
Yeah, the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists is one example. Their code hits key points. Honesty, respect, no misrepresenting credentials, no unauthorized public statements, no plagiarism, reporting dishonesty, intolerance for crime, but it applies to their members.
And maybe it's a bit general for forensics.
It includes a broad statement against professional dishonesty, but maybe not super specific for digital investigations. That's where the ISFCE comes in.
International Society of Forensic Computer Examiners. They have a more tailored code.
Yes, much more specific to professional conduct during digital forensic work. It covers commitment, integrity, objectivity, using validated methods, high moral standards, truthful testimony, avoiding conflicts of interest, following court orders, and thoroughly checking all evidence.
Sounds comprehensive.
It is, and the recommendation is strong. Consider using the ISFCE code as your guide, even if you're not a member. It's a solid framework.
And sticking to a code helps maintain objectivity.
That's the idea. And crucially, if you can't be impartial on a case, you have an ethical duty to step away. Don't participate.
I liked that anecdote about the expert being asked about their duty. Their answer was basically recreate the exam, report everything, no matter who it helps or hurts.
Perfect illustration. You followed the data. In digital forensics, often the data's meaning is pretty clear-cut, not much room for subjective spin.
Makes sense. The source also pushes for certifications, right?
Yeah. For ongoing training and experience, they show you've met a standard. But they don't make you infallible. Learning in this field never stops.
It's constantly changing.
Always. And that final definition of ethics, doing the right thing when no one is looking, that really resonates.
It does. Compromise your ethics, and you damage your career and the case.
The goal is always be unbiased, find the facts, present them clearly, not an advocate for either side, just the facts.
So let's quickly recap this deep dive. We've covered preparing for testimony in different legal settings,
Identifying those proceedings and the people involved,
crafting that all-important CV accurately,
differentiating it from just a regular resume,
and anchoring everything in objectivity and impartiality through a solid code of ethics during the investigation and on the stand.
Hopefully this gives you a solid foundation to apply these skills out there in the real world.
Absolutely. Understanding expert witness ethics isn't just an add-on, it's fundamental to credible testimony and the integrity of the whole process. If you want to dig even deeper, definitely check out the further reading mentioned in our source.
Good idea.
And now, something to think about. With digital evidence getting more complex all the time and the legal rules constantly shifting, how can we, as digital forensic investigators, keep adapting our ethical guidelines and our testimony techniques? How do we make sure we maintain trust and communicate our findings effectively and accurately in court as things continue to evolve?